Welcome to Flip Your Lid with Kim Honeycutt. Kim is a psychotherapist and executive director of ICU Talks, a mental health speaking ministry. This is a podcast about how to flip your lid and learning how to reconnect to who you really are.
All right, everybody. Thank you, Flip Your Lid audience, for being here. I am fangirling. Y'all, Brian Recker is here, and he is amazing. He is blowing up Instagram. He's probably blowing up TikTok. I'm too old to be on TikTok, but he is doing so much to help people know how to love your neighbor and to actually love yourself as well. So really glad to be with him. So I want to introduce Brian to all of you. So hey, Brian, thank you for being here.
Hey, Kim, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. So we're going to jump in and get to know him and let him get to know all of you as well. So here we go. All right, Brian, tell me what flipped your lid and what measures have you had to take to reconnect to who you really are?
So I was a pastor for a little over 8 years in evangelicalism, conservative evangelicalism. And I would say there was not one particular moment, although if I had to, I think, point to the thing that really brought the most cognitive dissonance was the rise of Donald Trump. So I would thank old Donnie T for flipping my lid.
Donnie T flipped the lid.
I think he flipped a lot of lids, Kim.
He did.
I
Still
think a
doing
lot
it.
of people, as dark as that time was, and I hope that we don't head into another Donald Trump presidency,
Right.
certainly.
Right.
But it really, the lines were drawn really clearly. It was hard not to all of a sudden be like, oh, wow, there are just two very different ways of being
Yeah.
in the world. And it made me realize, like, what side are you on? I really was, and I felt like I was on the wrong side. And that was a hard thing to reckon with, the realization that, I think I'm doing a bad thing. I think I'm a part of a bad thing. And it took some time for me to figure out what to do with that. And I think getting up to that point in my life, there had already been a lot of progression. I was not raised in evangelicalism. I was actually raised in something more conservative than evangelicalism. I was raised as an independent fundamental Baptist, which my dad is still an independent fundamental Baptist pastor who would even view evangelicals as quite worldly and liberal, because we had like rock and roll music for our worship music. You know what I'm saying? Whereas growing up, it was like piano only, suit every Sunday, King James Bible only. And so for me, getting out of fundamentalism and entering a more mainstream evangelicalism was like a progressive step at the time. It was me trying to get out of a thing that felt incredibly controlling and constricting. And I could be more myself. I could wear jeans to church. I could listen to rock and roll music. I could have a beer every once in a while. Ultimately, still had all the same conservative theology, essentially, with some minor tweaks, but basically similar theology to fundamentalism. And it took me a little while to realize, just because evangelicalism had more, like, you could look like a normal guy, and you'll see evangelical pastors that get shared online. They're often really cool, stylish looking people. They often do have tattoos. And meanwhile, they're spewing some really, really toxic things. And I think it's getting worse too, because
it is.
Those who didn't have Donald Trump flip their lids, like, if you're still in now, like, you're okay with, I think, a level of, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think for those of us who left, if you're still there, it's like you're kind of okay with it being that way, which I wasn't okay with. So 2015, I was an evangelical pastor. I was watching Donald Trump take control of the hearts and minds of a lot of the folks in my congregation. I remember when he first announced his presidency, and I thought it was a joke, and I actually used it as a sermon illustration of like hubris or something like that. And I thought it was something to laugh about. And then I realized, oh, this guy's got legs. There's people are actually into this. The people in my church are going to vote for this. And that was when I first felt like there was a distance between where I was at and where many of the Christians in my congregation were at, and really in evangelicalism as a whole. And for the next few years, I kind of made it my thing to, okay, this is cool. I'm in a position to not just preach to the choir. I can challenge people that are listening to Fox News every day. And on Sundays, at least for 30 minutes, I can talk about loving your neighbor, about, how Jesus welcomed people that were different and othered and often went to the margins and things like that. But unfortunately, you could only do that so much to a point from within the system. Especially in regards to LGBT people. That was one thing where I knew if I became affirming in that area, I would be out. And because so much of my identity was built in the complex web of relationships that I was in evangelicalism. Even outside of my church, I was networked to other pastors. I knew who I was because I was in this family,
Yeah.
this family of churches. It was a hard thing to just lose all of that. And it really had to come to a place. And it took 2020, I think the pause of 2020, when
Mm.
with COVID, we stopped meeting. And that was like, Sunday's always coming when you're a pastor. You don't have a lot of time to think
Yeah.
about your existential place in the world. You're planning your next Sunday sermon. You're trying to meet with
Mm-hmm.
people. You're always having hard conversations with folks. All of a sudden, everything stopped. And it was like the breath that I needed to realize that I was a part of something that I couldn't really stand
Mm.
behind with integrity.
Mm-hmm. That is such a setup, and I appreciate what you shared. And like, there's so much grief because this is an interweb. We're talking like this is how you get raised, and like what's rebellion to you is going to a church that's got more,
Yeah. It was a
hip
disappointment to
music.
my family when
Yeah.
I initially left fundamentalism and became a more mainstream evangelical. I had already, so that made it easier in some ways to move even further,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
slide to the
Yeah.
left, because I had already lost some of that, but I had found a new home. I had found a new people that respected me within that movement. And I think I also see how locking myself in as an evangelical pastor, becoming a pastor, getting that authority and institutional power,
Yes.
it makes it hard to keep changing because now I'm responsible to a congregation. They're looking me to have
Mm-hmm.
the answers. And I realized when I stepped away from that kept me from continuing to evolve in a lot of ways, which happened very
Mm-hmm.
quickly when I stepped out.
Yeah. Well, what you did was huge, and it's huge for anybody on any level when we look at what has authority over us, what's causing us to have authority over others, that to really look inside of that and to see, like, to pause and say, like, can I actually have a higher consciousness? Can I actually be connected to myself, God, and others and believe what I'm saying? Like, people have to really pause because what we do is we live in sympathetic, which is part of our fight response, right? We live in a place constantly that we feel better than, but we're told it's normal. Like, you really have to pause and say, can I stand for Jesus and be against groups of people? And you did that. And I just don't think the average person creates space internally or externally to go on that journey.
I think in some ways the pause from COVID was a gift, and I think it reveals how our hustle culture, our
Hmm.
nonstop, no rest, capitalist
Yeah.
world, the grind is so unceasing. It gives us such little time for self-reflection.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I mean, there was a great resignation
Mm.
across industries, but I think it affected pastors even more. I don't think my story is uncommon. I think a lot of pastors quit during that time for very similar reasons because they all had, for the first time in years, space to actually listen to
Yeah.
themselves and
Yeah.
space to actually, and also enough distance from. So within any Christian institution, we talk about accountability a lot, the accountability of community.
Uh-huh.
One of our statements actually that one of the other pastors came up with and we said a lot was like lone rangers or dead rangers. This
Mm.
idea that we're not meant to do it alone. We find our place in community and there's accountability there. And I can see the value in that, but also I can also see how because of the need for groupthink and the need to like not rock the boat
Yeah.
and wanting the approval of, like, if I were to change my
Mhm.
mind on any number of issues, I knew that people would call me a compromiser, a liberal,
Yeah.
I'm sliding away from the truth, I'm losing the faith, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want these people that I dearly love to think about me that way and talk about me that way. That puts an
Mhm.
incredible pressure on you to stay the same and not
Mhm.
listen to yourself and to tune yourself out. And so there were issues to, women in ministry, acceptance of LGBT people,
Yeah.
obvious things now in
Right.
retrospect that I did not feel at liberty to listen to my own conscience about.
Mm.
And that pause of COVID where we weren't meeting and I had some space from not only the work itself, but also from the relationships, not seeing these people, it made me realize what I actually felt about some of these things.
Yeah.
And when we went back to meeting that fall of 2020, I was like, oh, I can't do this. Like,
Yeah.
we got back in the room
Yeah.
and I was like, oh boy, like I don't want
Yeah.
to be here at all. I'm not in the same place.
Yeah.
And so I put in my resignation in October of 2020.
Yeah, it's powerful. I mean, obviously you did the shadow work, right? You did that there's a spiritual awakening that happens, right? That just because we are Christ followers doesn't mean that there is a transformation, right? That there's enough collective change to be transformed. There's something that really transformed you. And I tell you, especially because so much initially what you talk about and you still take the time to put energy and love into is how LGBTQIA people are viewed and treated in the church, and speaking so openly about how you could not have been a pastor and been open to same-sex marriages, even though the Bible really doesn't say anything about it, right? We've been lied to about that. But you don't have to speak into that, and yet you've reconciled it, and you speak very clearly and openly about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of that, there's a guilty conscience aspect to it, I think. A
Mm.
little bit of it is, and I
Hmm.
got this critique actually recently. Somebody actually eviscerated me in a DM not too long ago and was just like, you're just, we don't need, and I get it. Like, I'm not trying to center myself. I recognize that I'm, white, straight, cisgender man, and we need to do better at centering diverse voices. So I'm not trying to build a thing around
Hmm.
me. But this person was basically like, the last thing we need is one of you pastors who you were part of the problem, and now you think that you can say all this stuff, and we're just going to think it's cool or whatever. And I mean, I understand where this person was coming from emotionally, but I was basically like, listen, yeah, I recognize that I was an evangelical pastor, and I preach things that I don't believe anymore. But
Hmm.
that's why I feel like it's important for me to be public about what I believe now. I do want to undo some of that damage. I do find a lot of
Mm.
purpose in a sense of, for a while, and listen, I was not one of those preachers that was like big anti-gay. We were a church like many evangelical non-denominational churches where you have a stated position about the issue, but you kind of avoid talking about it because,
Right. Right.
right, that's the way that most of those, I think, evangelical
Yes.
non-denominational churches are. That being said,
Hmm.
I did hold to that. We were a non-affirming church.
Hmm.
And so I felt that was the initial series of videos that I did. I felt very much like, as a conscience issue, because I was previously publicly non-affirming, I wanted to be as public as possible about being affirming.
Hmm.
I knew that that was going to cause issues with the way that my old church viewed me. And in fact, the first Instagram videos that I did 3 or 4 videos in a row about why Christians should accept gay people.
Yeah.
And after I did that, my old church took down all my sermons, my 8+ years of sermons, from their website.
Right. Sure.
Um, and you sent out a church-wide email about me that they were praying for me, that kind of a thing. And at the same time, though, I received a bunch of feedback from people who were both in evangelicalism still and
Mm.
wrestling and conflicted, and
Hmm.
outside, who were like, this meant a lot that you said that. And that encouragement did make me feel like my voice mattered, at least to some people. Not to say that like my voice needs to be centered in any kind of way, but
Mm.
if people are being encouraged by the fact that people can change, like, I think that that is an encouraging thing, that
Hmm.
somebody could have been in that and actually even teaching that, you know?
Yeah, Brian, I need you. Like, and my wife and I have talked about this because we're doing a documentary called Othered, right? Because we have been othered, and your voice of somebody who doesn't have to reconcile this, and not only you reconciling it, you're repairing what you preached for 8 years. That is very powerful, and I would never criticize that whatsoever. I need you to know, like, we need people, because if I went somewhere to speak, and I do, how they hear me as someone who is openly gay and how they hear you
Yeah.
are two different things. And so until there is an equality to that, we need you to have a voice and do exactly what you're doing.
That means a lot. I do. I want to steward. I recognize that there's privilege that I have, and I'm trying to steward it.
Yeah.
It's hard to always. Yeah, I think I don't want to just be fueled by a sense of like a guilty conscience. And
Mhm.
I will say I am a little embarrassed about for how long I believed some of those things that I believed. That being said, ultimately, I'm also proud of myself.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I'm honest about that too. Like, I don't spend too much time wallowing in guilt and embarrassment, because
Right.
actually I know a lot of people that were raised in what I was raised in that haven't made those
Right.
transitions and come this
Yeah.
far. And so I am thankful that I ultimately had the humility to say I was wrong
Mhm.
and I'm sorry. and I
Yeah.
want to say the
Yeah.
good thing now. I want to
Yeah.
be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
Um,
That's so sincere. I feel that. That's so sincere from you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I find a lot of joy, honestly, in doing that.
Mm.
And I've also found that the queer people that I've met along this journey are like the best people.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Say that. Say that.
more interesting than my straight friends, more
Mhm.
fun to talk to.
Yeah.
Um, their religious trauma is, heightened, and therefore we always have a
Mhm.
lot to bond over.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
and often incredibly spiritual people.
Yes. Yes.
Um, I don't know if you've seen this in your experience,
Mm.
and maybe this is just, coincidental, but I have found that I think gay people who grew up in the church, or queer of any kind, whatever sexual minority you might have been, if you felt that there was something different about you didn't fit into the mold that was
Mhm.
being sold by evangelicalism, I find that those people were more likely, at least in their early spiritual development, to double down on Christian spirituality, because they were being told that something was wrong with them, and this
Yes.
is the solution. Christian
Yes.
spirituality is the solution. And so they often went deeper, while their peers during high school were like, I don't really care. They went to youth group, right?
Yeah.
While their peers during college were like, I'm going to go chase girls. They went to YWAM. Like
Right.
they got more involved because they
Mhm.
wanted to be better. They wanted to fix themselves. They felt like a sense of, and also because there was a love, I think, for God, and a
Yeah.
desire that God would meet with them. They were being told that
Mhm.
like God wants to change you and save you and rescue
Mhm.
you from yourself.
Mhm.
And they were it was like they were being told that they had a disease that they didn't have, and that the church was
Mm.
the cure that they needed to drink, and they were
Yeah.
drinking that cure, and it was actually giving
Right.
disease of often self-hatred.
Yeah.
But I think the result of all that, when they come out on the other side and learn how to love themselves and learn how to dismantle some of that bullshit,
Mhm.
I find that there is an ability to connect with yourself and God and see some of those spiritual things more clearly than their straight peers who didn't have to those same existential wrestles with their identity.
Mhm.
It's a very
Mhm.
specific thing that a lot of the I'm not envious of it. I think that it was a horrible thing that happened to any queer person who grew up in evangelicalism. It's hard not to come away scarred from that experience in some way. But I
Mhm.
think those scars also have made people incredibly powerful and self-aware, and their ability to love is really, really powerful too.
Yeah, there's a repurposing, and talk about having the muscle to give grace
Yeah.
is to be like, I'm deeply in love with Jesus, and I'm a pastor. I preach at my church, and so to be that, knowing the last stage I was on, I was taken off of once I came out, right after 16 years, like was
Wow.
taken off of that, and exactly the experience that you're describing, right? And about like it's a non-denominational. It seems like they're okay, but they won't come out with a statement saying whatever, and to have that experience, but to walk to my church in the amount of grace that I now have had opportunity, repetitious opportunity to give to people. And I'll tell you, Brian, like I'd love for you to come to my church sometimes if you don't live too far off. You walk into my church, I go to
Where are you
water.
at?
So I'm at Watershed in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh yeah, I know
Yeah.
Watershed.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
great
yeah.
church. You guys had Brian McLaren there not too long ago, and I was
Well,
like contemplating the drive.
yeah. So I actually ICU Talks, which is I'm the executive director and founder of a mental health ministry called ICU Talks. We brought Brian in first, and he spoke Saturday night, and he stayed Sunday and spoke at Watershed as well. So I almost reached out to you about that to see if you wanted to come be a part of it. Yeah, because Brian's
Hit me up
amazing.
next time.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll just get your butt on stage next time. How
That
about that?
would be so fun. I would
Yeah,
love
but you walk into Watershed, and the fact that like there's a man on stage
that. Uh-huh.
who's dressed as a woman, heterosexual, but just enjoys wearing women's clothes, who's
Wow.
singing on stage with hands raised, praising, and no one looks at that because you know what they're doing is they are looking internally and having an experience with God. They're not looking at the fact that he's wearing a dress, but it is comforting to me that no one's looking at the fact that he's wearing a dress. Right, like, look at the things people focus on in
Oh
church, and
yeah.
in Christianity, they're focused on so many things and what they're missing in that moment, that they're focused on somebody who doesn't look like them or act like them.
That's amazing. I have questions for you. Like how to even build a spiritual community like that? Because for so many
Mhm.
people that probably just heard that, and maybe a lot of the people that listen to the pod are not surprised by that, but I think a lot of people would be very surprised that a church like that even exists
Oh,
and have
they
a hard
are.
time even
Sure.
imagining that you
Mm-hmm.
could get a room of Christians to
Yeah.
not just be jaw dropped at
Yeah.
a man in a
Right.
dress singing a worship song. Like that
Right.
just breaks people's brains.
Oh, yeah. People can't come around that. And what's so beautiful is that most of the people there have been a part of the 99. They became the one that walked away. They've been a part of the 100 sheep. They became the one that walked away, and somehow we all found each other,
Mm,
right? And became the new 100, right? The new group of people who are just really spiritually thirsty and hungry, and just not interested in being against people, but that includes ourselves,
right.
right? That we have to learn how to not be against ourselves, because if I'm against me, I'm going to be against you. If I'm against you, I'm going to be against me, and that we're seeking true liberation.
That has been a big part of my spiritual journey in the last few years is learning to listen to myself. I mean, that was one of the I didn't realize the extent to which I didn't know how to do that. I really
Yeah.
did. I was
Mm-hmm.
totally oblivious to that
Yeah.
until like I said, I stepped down being a pastor, and it was there was a lot of confusion, like especially around. So there were some issues that I didn't change my mind on until I got out from under that institutional pressure. And one of them would be LGBT affirmation in an official way. I think in the back of my mind, it was like I knew emotionally I would love to believe that. I just never gave myself permission. It
Hmm.
was like it's like honestly, it's the same as when I read evangelicals on hell. None of them want to believe in hell.
Right.
I'm writing a book about hell right now, and as I'm researching it, I'm reading some things that evangelicals say about it. And for instance, there's a Francis Chan book about hell,
Uh-huh.
Racing Hell. It's kind of the one of the main evangelical books on it. And in the introduction, they talk about how that no, they don't like this doctrine. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. We know that, but ultimately, God, it's like a God's ways are higher than our ways sort of argument.
Right.
And there is a sense in which how you feel about these things doesn't matter.
Hmm.
You just got to get with the program on whether
Yeah.
it's hell or LGBT issues or whatever the case. And I didn't know that how I felt actually does matter. And actually, I had a wisdom all along that was there. I think about when my dad took me as a kid doing like tract ministry once a week. We would do tract distribution.
Right. Right.
We would stand in like the subway in New York City. My
Hmm.
dad was a fundamental Baptist pastor in New York City, and we'd go in the
Wow.
subways every Thursday and pass out tracts to just people walking by that basically said, like, I mean, some of these tracts were brutal. Like they had pictures of flames, like on the,
Oh, yeah.
these are
So
the,
seen them. I've seen them.
it's the, yeah, if you died today, where are you going sort of thing.
Right.
And
Right.
for all of us, we were told like to try to engage people in conversation. And really what you were trying to do in that conversation was get somebody to the point where you're going to ask them, like, if you died today, do you know where you're going? And
Yeah.
like, do you know that like your sins deserve eternal punishment? That whole thing.
Right.
And it didn't feel good to me as a child. I didn't
Yeah.
like to do
Yeah.
that. I didn't want to do that. It felt,
Right.
but I thought that that was a spiritual deficiency in me.
Mm.
I thought that I was actually less spiritual for not wanting to do that. That
Mm.
that I was wrong. Like actually, oh, my dad is right. And if I was more spiritual, I would want to do that. What I
Mm-hmm.
now look back and see, no, I knew even then that this feels wrong because it was wrong. It's a wrong
Yeah.
thing to do.
That's right. That's
This
right.
isn't leading to connection between me and my neighbor. It's
Yeah.
just leading to disconnection.
Yeah. That's right.
And so I hated this thing in myself that was actually a good thing. I was drowning it out. And I
Yeah.
replaced it with the dogma and the way I'm supposed to be and submission to authority and that sort of thing.
I I like could jump up and down what you're saying. It's just such a part of my soul, and the fact that we can just openly talk about this, right? And not being against anybody, but just understanding the authority that comes over us, and the idea that in our DNA we are in such fear of rejection. The things that we are willing to do, not question, not think about, that ends up being the belief that has authority over us instead of God having authority within us. Like
Mm,
we get so trapped, right? But I'm gonna get rejected from the tribe, and if I'm not in the tribe, I can't have food, I can't have water, I will die. Like that's in our DNA, and
right.
so we just keep saying yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am. Right, we just keep staying with the program.
And that's helpful to remember. That helps me have grace on myself. It's like you were
Mm.
literally biologically wired.
Yes.
What I did was I had to push against like some
Yeah,
evolutionary,
absolutely.
biology. Um, And ultimately, there's very material and financial like things here too. I think
True.
we can over spiritualize some of this stuff. Pastors, not only that Sunday's always coming, they don't have like the space to think about it. They also,
Hmm.
as soon as their mind drifts to that, they would lose their job. What other, for these guys who their whole career is within
Yeah.
evangelicalism, their degree,
Sure.
my degree is ministry. Listen, I got a job like doing recruiting for like 40K. And then I
Right.
got a project management certificate and I started doing some project management that I hate. Like, it's not easy if your whole career was ministry and evangelicalism. All of a sudden it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I don't believe that anymore. What now? You
Right.
can't just go and get a job at a more progressive church that
Yeah.
easy. You're not involved in those networks. You don't have those
True. It's
relationships.
such a good point.
And so it's a difficult, and then once I took that step, I wasn't even sure that I wanted to be a pastor again.
Right.
It was because here was my thought when I first stepped down. I first thought, okay, clearly pastoring is like a big part of my life. I'll just be a progressive pastor now, right? I'll just be a more progressive pastor. But my fear initially was, well, I changed. I was a pastor for a while and I didn't change sooner because of the institutional pressure. Why would I
Hmm.
put myself into a new institution, maybe just a more progressive one, but that
Yeah.
could theoretically put a limit on my spiritual growth and development in other ways?
Yeah.
Like, and at the time, I wasn't familiar with even churches like Watershed, which I think are even more potentially, I don't know if open-minded is the right word, but I was
Hmm.
thinking of things like the Episcopal Church, where it's like, well, what if I
Right.
don't know if I want to even identify as a Christian anymore? Would I feel safe saying that without losing
Right.
my job? Probably not. And is that something that a direction I want to go? And actually, as I've continued to think about it, I think I could see myself pastoring again someday, maybe in the right
Hmm.
kind of context that felt like it was just a place of curiosity and spiritual
Hmm.
growth that left a lot of room for ecumenism and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And so I think there is something to that, but um, I forget where I was going with this exactly. Other than like, it's hard to step out of that for sure.
Sure. It's sobering. It's just like, I got sober, a long time ago, but it meant I walked away from friends, what I understood. It wasn't a job loss, but it was an identity loss. It's a loss of everything, right? So the idea of you deciding, like, if I really allow myself to be in my essence and all these false things fall away, like, who do you call? Who's your friend? What Where are you financially? I know you have kids. How do I take care of my kids? Like, all these things happen, and if you wanna talk about someone standing on faith, that would be you. And to have your church, who says they're doing it in a sense of faith, to try to erase you. But and again, they're erasing who you are, who you really aren't, right?
Yeah.
And that what you did was stood there as self and say, "I am willing to trust that I'm really gonna be okay, even without everything I've always known." Like, that is an act of faith.
Yeah.
And it's trauma, it's grief, and you're still just standing there taking care of yourself. Like, that's impressive.
What's been cool is what I've found is that the more I've been authentic to my inner voice, my sense of what is true and what is right, my integrity, in the scary moments when I've done that, I find that people do just rise up and become your people.
Mhm.
They're there. The people are
Yeah.
there, and new
Yeah.
people will find you. New groups will form around you, and
Yeah.
it's slow. And I think in some ways we don't have. I don't have the institutional sort of security that I had before when I was in evangelicalism. Um, but and churches like Watershed are few and far between,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Um, I do go to a church that it's a United Methodist church. I think they're probably a little bit more structured and
Mm.
liturgical than Watershed, but I think
Mhm.
it's a safe church. At least I feel my pastor knows where I'm at, and I don't feel like anything. He's affirming of where I'm at, which is great. Um, and those communities do exist. And I just find that the more I do it, the more authentic I am, the less lonely I am, actually. Even though
Mm.
I think that it's going to cause me to alienate people or maybe make me more lonely, I find I'm less lonely because it's my authentic self that's being affirmed by people as
That's
opposed
right.
to a false
That's
self.
right. That's
And
right.
you don't get, yeah, does it feel nice when I'm encouraged by anybody? Sure. But I think it feels better when I'm encouraged for being my true self than my false self. Um,
Mhm. That's just such a part of the healing process, because there's institutional betrayal,
yeah.
right? Like that. So the idea of trust an institution again. the religious trauma that you experience, that so many of us experience, and the level of awareness that you have in your ability just to sit in this and just to keep speaking your truth. Like it's that idea of, I think about Jesus, obviously incredibly authentic, has 12 disciples, right? I think they're a total of 14, but we're understanding of 12. That's not a lot of people, because it's people like who can, because you gravitate towards where you are. And so if you want to have false personality, you can gravitate towards people who have the same false personality, the same beliefs. Like you, again, standing there alone and slowly, probably this through a very slow cadence, like rebuilding your life. What's the most surprising part of this rebuilding for you?
Well, I mean, this has all been very surprising. I didn't go about trying to build a platform. That was,
Hmm.
I mean, I didn't know that that was gonna happen, you know? I was like I said, I was working a job that I didn't really like very much. I got a project management job. I was just trying to pay my bills. I had a lot of fear, that and, this is a long story that we won't get into necessarily, but post deconstruction in that space, my wife and I separated, which I didn't really see coming, which was another level of, I think, loneliness and loss, and felt like just another area of my life that I was going to go into a rebuilding phase on. And it was the first time I was parenting primarily alone, and I realized how much
Yeah.
I was leaning on her in my parenting,
Right.
having to really rediscover how to even just be just a single dad. I have 50% custody, so I don't have them all the time, but when I have them, it's just me and them, which,
Right.
and there's 3 of them. So it can be a lot. So I was going through all that, and I was just happy to get a job that could pay my bills, even though it had no real creative outlet. And somewhere in all of that happening, I still just felt, in my spirit, and I don't know, I could over spiritualize it and make it into a calling. I could just say, every pastor is like a low level exhibitionist and we just love to hear ourselves talk. Like,
There's a certain grandiosity to it. There is. I
people
admit
need
that.
my opinions.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, I admit
I
it.
don't think I
Yeah.
truly believe that, but I'm also an external processor. I think a lot of it,
Mm.
my posting is like, well, what do I just had this thought. This feels important to me. What do I do with it? I know.
Yeah.
I'll post it.
Yeah. I just, I'm just
That's
going to talk
honestly
out
what
loud
it
and
is.
see what I say. Yeah.
I was just putting stuff out there.
Mm.
And people knew that I had been a pastor. And so I had a very small, I think I started on Instagram 1 year ago. At this time, 1 year ago, I had like 800 followers on Instagram. So this is all very new.
Wow.
And I started just posting where I was at on my spiritual journey. The fact that I was wrestling with a lot of uncertainty. People are like, well, yeah, you left, you affirm gay people. What do you believe now? And like, well, I don't know. And guess what? That's okay. Giving
That's
people
okay.
permission to not
Yeah.
know what they believe about some of these things, to have a level of
Mhm.
agnosticism to exist inside of their faith and not abandon
Mhm.
Christianity while still saying, yeah, I don't know about some of these things. People were like, I think drawn to some of that honesty that I think pastors are. Okay, when I was a pastor, I did feel like I had to know everything. I'm an
Mhm.
Enneagram 5, which
Mm.
the core fear is not knowing. And
Right.
so, in some sense, the pastor thing worked for me because I was just always on a quest to make sure I had the answer, always be prepared
Right.
to give an answer. And I was always trying to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And I didn't realize how much that was not only exhausting me, but actually making me it was giving into the dark side of my Enneagram type in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
sure.
so I think since stepping away, I've realized, oh, wait, I don't need to know everything. And I've really pressed into that, to where people still ask me all the time, well, what do you believe? Did Jesus literally rise from the dead? Is Jesus really the Messiah? Is Jesus the only way to God? These different questions that people want to have dogmatic answers to and want to know one way or the other. Where do you land on this? And when I give very agnostic answers to some of that, but still refuse to remove myself from the umbrella of Christianity, some people don't exactly know what to do with that. But for me, that was like a very refreshing part of me stepping into myself and into health, like a more healthy place. So I was
Mhm.
processing a lot of that, and I was just talking about it, and it resonated with people. And this platform has grown, and I don't always know what I'm going to do with it.
Mhm.
But that's been a surprise for sure. I think people are drawn to that honesty and that curiosity and that sense of like, it's okay. Giving people permission to not have all the answers, surprisingly, is not very common in people that are, pastors or spiritual figures.
Yeah, but you also have a very authentic delivery, just to add to, to everything that you're saying, because I found you, I feel like pretty early on when I started listening to you, and then people started sending me your reels. And I was like, okay. Like when that kind of thing starts happening, I know there's a little God winks, God shots for me, and I start kind of paying attention, and kept sending me stuff partly because you talked about the Levitica community, and just checking in about us and speaking. So it's like such a casual way of speaking about something that causes fire,
Mm.
but you're doing it in a way that just lands with people. And so I watched you go from like a really good following to like you're at like 170K,
Well, 130, 130.
130.
But still, I
Okay,
mean, it's a lot for
that's
this space
well,
because it's kind of
but
a niche
from
space.
the time I started following you to now, like
Yeah.
really brief time. So just knowing like people are hungry and thirsty for permission to live in the middle and not live in extremes. And you're just so casually, but with authority, right? But like a loving authority, giving people permission for that.
Yeah. And I it's sad to me that that's so rare, like,
Hmm.
because none of us really, the things that we're talking about are not the kind of things that you can talk about with certainty.
Right.
And
Right.
yet we've been taught to speak about these things with a level of
Hmm.
certainty that's actually impossible. And therefore we have to fake it. We have to
Yeah.
manufacture certainty
Right.
because the pastors seem so certain. And when you
Hmm.
make a profession of faith, we feel a sense that we need to be really certain to show the authenticity of that profession. I'm
Yeah.
sure God would want us to be certain. Certainly, God wouldn't want us to not be certain
Right.
about this sort of thing.
Right.
Also, the stakes are so fucking high because if you're not certain, you might burn for forever. So you better be goddamn certain. Like,
Right.
all of it is leading to a level of certainty that's not actually possible because we're talking about things that we weren't there for,
Mm.
that even if we were there, a lot of these things are invisible spiritual realities. When it comes
Mhm.
to things like the atonement, we're talking about metaphysical concepts that can't even be grasped, you know,
Mhm.
that we're when we talk about things like the Trinity, we're talking about things that people argued about and decided how are we going to put language to things that can't even be spoken about, just so we
Right.
can gesture towards having language to speak about the unspeakable. And
Yeah.
yet we want to have certainty about these things.
Yeah.
I think it's a very Western way of thinking. It's very American that
Mhm.
we
It
want to have
is.
everything figured out. And it's exhausting. And it's
Mm.
actually not spiritual at all. None of that actually makes you spiritual in the way that matters. That
Right.
kind of certainty isn't necessary to be connected to God. It's not
Mhm.
necessary to feel connected to yourself or to love other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Absolutely true. Like there's such an embodiment about like just feeling God's love just tapping into the divine within me that the head knowledge doesn't let me get there. Right, and it's good to have, but when I started listening to, like, Rob Bell, you, being part of Watershed, Pete Enns, like, different people, Dan McLennan, I know you did, if I'm saying his name right, love him. He's gotta be an Enneagram 5. He has to be.
Smart dude.
Smart guy, and his tone is so flat. He's
He
like,
kills me.
it
He's actually
kills me.
hysterical.
I love him. Like, I just love that he just putting it out there, and it's just very academic and it's intellectual. But that allows it to land for me in a just like with the way you do it. It lands in a way that I am granted permission to
Mhm.
interact with it in a way that is personal to me. And that to me is part of the personal relationship with Jesus. That means that God is big enough that it can land in a certain way for me, and it doesn't have to land in the same way for you.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that stuff. For all this
Hmm.
talk of like not certainty and like true spirituality, I think can be discovered like you cannot know all these things and you can be a very spiritual person. But I do love to wrestle with the big questions. I think that stuff can be very interesting, but it's almost like, yeah, these, just because you're like a theo bro, you're somebody who
Hmm.
nerds out over theology. I find that to be such a different thing than actually being a spiritual person or a loving person. Those don't, they can even be at odds with each other at times,
Hmm.
when,
Sure.
especially when you use that theology as purity codes in order to keep people in or keep people out. You're defining boundaries of what counts as
Hmm.
true spirituality and what doesn't. You've begun to
Hmm.
do the exact thing that Jesus was, I think, condemning in most cases.
Yes.
And you're actually distancing yourself from love,
Yeah.
and you're causing disconnection in your relationships. And so I think we have to be so careful. For me, I like to explore, but yeah, what the ideas that make me feel connected are the ones that I'm wanting to press into.
Yeah. Is there something in particular that's helping you feel connected? Because I'm a neuro nerd. I study neuroscience a lot, and I teach people neuroscience. And one of the thing is like fixing, trying to change, trying to cure someone. All those are a complete disconnect from self and the other person. Like the minute I step in and take away your autonomy and try to tell you something and fix you, I can't connect to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, so just like what's a connecting point for you?
For me, so the listening to myself thing has been big lately, and one of the things that's been helpful in that regard, um, well, a few things, and I'm like a resource guy, so I do a lot of reading. But I've recently, in the last year, encountered the work of Byron Katie, um,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
her 4 questions have been a
Mm-hmm.
really helpful thing for me in listening to
Yes.
myself. This idea that beliefs, um, that a belief can actually, I can ask whether it serves me and actually judge the
Mm-hmm.
fruit of that belief and what it's doing to me. Or 4 questions. Okay, is it true?
Yeah.
Do you know that
Is
it's
it
true? And
really
then
true?
it, what does it do when you
Mm-hmm.
believe that thought in your body? How does it feel? What
Right.
happens when you believe that thought?
Right.
And then who are you without that thought? Like, and
Yeah.
actually thinking about, does this belief, does this narrative, this thing that I'm believing about this person or myself, is it leading me into levels of peace and connection and joy, or is it actually disconnecting me from them? And that is a way to know, I think, if something is real and
Yeah.
worth believing. And
Yeah.
that is not what I was taught, because that feels so subjective to people. That feels
Mm-hmm.
very woo woo. In terms of like the evangelicalism I was brought up, we were just told objective truth was really hammered into me,
Mm-hmm.
the need for something to be objectively true, as opposed to asking, oh, you believe that? Okay, what happens in your body when you believe that? Like,
Right.
that is
Right.
not a question I was raised with.
Right.
And
Not
I
at
wish,
all.
like, what would have happened if I was told to check in with myself? And how does it
Mm-hmm.
feel in your body when I was sitting there as a 6-year-old in a pew being told that I would go to hell for my sins, but
Yeah.
that I could pray this prayer and maybe be saved. Like, oh, is it true? Okay, well, yeah, it's true. The preacher's saying it's true. Do you absolutely know that it's true? Well,
Mm-hmm.
I guess the preacher hasn't seen hell, so maybe there's some holes we can poke in this. How does it feel in your body when you believe that thought? I'm scared shitless. Who or what would you be
Yeah.
without that thought?
Right.
No
Yeah.
hell? I think I could connect to a loving God a little bit better without that thought.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that is so good. And again, like your autonomic nervous system, and I'll just be a nerd for a second. Like you have ventral vagal, it's your place of connection. This is actually where, when we really feel like we're in God's presence, that's where we are. It's place of connection, being grounded, mutual delight. Your seconds are sympathetic. That's fight, fight, freeze, fawn. Your third is called dorsal vagal. That is complete shutdown. God created this system to protect you. So your system's never wrong, but you knowing where you are in these three states. This is what to me has to be taught, because if I'm in, let's say I'm in fight response, right, hearing about hell, how I hear it, everything that I will hear around that will support me staying in it,
Hmm.
because that's what your system does. So there's a host of attorneys in each state that will keep you right where you are, because that's what they believe has to protect you, so to speak, right? So if I don't stop and question, get connected to self, and from that place interact with whatever's coming towards me, then I'm going to be dysregulated, and whatever decision I make next will be from a state of dysregulation. And that causes the pastor to have authority over me,
Hmm.
the church to have authority over me, and it means that I don't actually get to participate in my own life. And so if Christ died for me, however you want to view that, then I'm supposed to be in my own life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, he died for the real me. And
that's
so
right.
discovering who that is has been an interesting journey, because in some ways I
Mm,
don't know that I had permission to do that
that's right.
until recently. And I think that's maybe what so I do ask. I don't want, I don't, this isn't the Brian show. I have asked though,
Yes, it
like,
is. Go,
why
Brian.
why did people connect, like, why are there's a lot of people
Hmm.
saying a lot of things on Instagram. Like, I wasn't trying, my stuff isn't glossy. I'm not doing a lot of graphic design. I have no production. I'm just in my bedroom filming myself. Why are so many people resonating with it? And I think it is that sense of, I'm just really aggressively trying to be as authentic as possible.
Hmm.
And I think that anytime we do that, it is attractive, because we all see that light and recognize that we want that for
Hmm.
ourselves.
Right.
And yeah, ultimately, when the more true you are to yourself, I think the more beautiful of a person you will become, because I do believe that who we are is very good. When you
Mm-hmm.
believe that, actually, you're this horrible, wicked person, you're trying to get away from who you really are. When we're doing that, we're getting away from the most beautiful part of ourselves.
That's right.
We're going to
You got
war
it.
against the holy, beautiful thing that we are.
Yeah.
What a
Yeah.
tragedy.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's so painful. Brian, do you think part of what people really are, again, gravitating towards you and just, you know, and finding their own internal freedom through your external expression? You think part of it is the Enneagram 5? Because you as a pastor, as a 5, we know the average pastor is a 3 or an 8, right? So, and I think most of them are 3s.
Yeah.
And I'm an 8, so go 8s. Right, we're all aggressive stances. But for you to be because you're non-aggressive stance, right? You're withdrawn stance. For you to be a 5, did that make it did that almost give you the ability to have the insight and the thought process around what was happening to you? Whereas aggressive stance, especially as a 3 or an 8,
Yeah.
it's not about feelings. It's just about go, go, go.
Yeah. Definitely. Right. Like the church growth mindset is hard to, I think for a lot of pastors, they're just so stuck in that. What's the next project? What's the next mountain
Mhm.
to climb? What's the next mission to tackle? And it's all
Mhm.
about growing the institution. And, I don't say that as like an attack on anybody in particular. I just think that's an easy thing to fall into.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I didn't get really swept up in that. And I think for
Yeah.
me, if I could get swept up into something in a negative way, the ideas can be like, you can get overly trapped in dogma and ideas and debating
Mm.
theology and lose connection. Right. And that
Right,
would be
sure.
more my downfall as a 5, is I could get lost in the books and the ideas and the being right. And, but I think for me now, I'm trying to use some of that to help reframe. I think because of that, I have a pretty clear sight on the way that evangelicalism frames things. I think I saw it really clearly. I was doing it. I was
Right.
I was doing the thing. I loved Tim Keller for a while. He was my
Yeah.
guy. And
Right, sure.
he and I'm kind of angry at him now, although I try not to speak ill of the dead, but I stayed an evangelical probably a lot longer than I would have, because he did such a good job of packaging it so
Mhm.
nicely. So
Mhm.
look, no. Oh, you think that sounds shitty? No, let me spin it this way. Let me nuance it this way. He polished that turd up so well that he made evangelicalism sound like this smart, beautiful, winsome thing. He always used the word
Mm.
winsome. He made it so
Mm.
fucking winsome, right? And I got to be good at that too.
Right.
To my
Right.
shame and to my detriment, nobody made
Mm.
evangelicalism sound better than me when I was an evangelical pastor. Let me tell you,
Right.
I'm glad they took those 8 years of sermons down, because I made evangelicalism sound damn good. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, they did you a favor. How nice of them. They
No,
didn't
I mean,
even
I
know.
stand by, I'm sure, a lot of what I said. I was still me in various ways, but I think that because I really saw the way that it worked, I'm able to now use
Mm.
some of that to say, to dismantle it a bit. But yeah, I think that's my five coming
Mhm.
out to play for sure.
Mhm.
But I try not to, I think where I'm pushing back against that and not wanting to live in that fear of not knowing. I think that's the core fear that I can have as a 5, is to really, I'm learning to release that in a lot of ways too, and speak to the sense that we can be obsessed with having the right answers. And I think that's where a lot of my awakening has come from, is giving myself permission to not know and not have all the right answers
Mhm.
and be at
Mhm.
peace with that.
Mhm.
Is like me trying to push against my type.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to honor Watershed again, David Roberts is one of my favorite people, is one of the pastors there, and he's a 5, and he speaks so well about the both ands of the world and the contradictions, and that there's such beauty in the contradictions. And the average, not an average, but a lot of Christians run from the contradiction. You can't digest when someone says the Bible has contradictions. Like, I was taught to fight against that it's
Yeah.
inherent,
Right.
right? And the Bible stands alone without it being inherent.
Yeah. I love that now. I'm learning to love that. Like, even I was
Yeah.
reading recently about, within the Jewish tradition, arguing Torah is like a sacred thing. They've got a whole book. I
Mm.
believe the Talmud is the book of arguments. It's basically a book of rabbis arguing about different positions, and these are unresolved. in the Talmud.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
the arguments are what you learn from. You learn from the debate. There's
Yeah.
not a resolution that's given
Yeah,
to you.
that's good. That's
And
good.
that's a holy book in the Jewish tradition.
Right.
They consider
Right.
that book of arguments to be a holy book.
Yeah, that's really good. I didn't know that. That's beautiful to hear.
And we did not make room for that
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
evangelicalism, at least. I think there's room for that in Christianity in a global sense. Some streams have done that more than others. Eastern Orthodoxy has left a lot of room for mystery.
Mhm.
But that to me is a spiritual practice in some
Hmm.
ways of leaving that room for mystery. That doesn't mean you don't engage in the argument. Like, I care deeply about the argument. It's not like, I don't give a shit. Trinity, not Trinity, Jesus' divinity. Who cares? Like, you know what? On one level, I totally respect that. Like, can you love
Yeah.
God without really engaging in that stuff? Yeah, I think so. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I like to engage in that stuff, but not to come up with the right answers.
Right.
You can
Right.
even just the entering into the conversation pushes us deeper into the mystery. It causes, if it leads you into awe, and this is
Mhm.
the way my brain works. That kind of arguing and debating and thinking deeply without arriving at a conclusion makes me feel connected to
Mhm.
source, to the universe, to
Yeah,
God.
that's good.
To some people it would just frustrate them probably, and that's
Yeah.
okay. I don't know that everybody needs to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it goes back to that when we learn to be connected within our nervous system, and that from here, and I know what it feels like to leave connection, but I know that I can stay in conversation and not lose self because I'm connected to self, right? Like that you don't have to, and I mean this, I'm very about social justice, but you don't have to agree with me. I will sit with you if there's an openness to to just listen and have some curiosity towards where I am as I have curiosity towards you. Like, what a foundation if that was every conversation.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
would all learn a lot more from each other.
Yeah. We would just learn,
Well,
period.
right. And
Right?
I
And
think
unlearn.
that's one thing where I think evangelical, very dogmatic theology, it ruins relationships, because when you enter into a
Mhm.
relationship thinking that they're damned and you're not, you're
Yeah, that's
saved and
good.
they're unsaved,
Yeah,
you're
that's
worlds
good.
apart from that person. How
Yeah.
do I have something to learn from you
Yeah.
if literally I'm going to heaven and you're going to hell? No, no, no. I
Right.
don't have
That's
anything to
so
learn from
good.
you. You
That's
need
so
something
good.
from me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good
There's no
point.
mutuality, and mutuality is the foundation of a healthy relationship.
Mhm. That is secure connection. It's mutuality and mutual delight. Like, want to delight in each other. How am I gonna delight if I've decided you're going to hell?
I have to change you.
That's right. Which
It
automatic disconnection, automatically. The minute
At
you
the
try to
moment,
change
in
me.
fact, as you know, as a youth, like, I mean, I had unsaved family members. We would have used
Yeah.
that term. I wouldn't use
Right.
that term now. Um, and we prayed for them when we would go to family get-togethers. We would pray for them on the way there. We would pray for
Mhm.
them on the way home. Did I feel connected to those family members at that family get together? No, not I
No.
didn't feel that they were my family in that sense of safety and like we're all in this together. We can all
Mhm.
relax into one another's presence. We're at home with one
Mhm.
another. No, I felt alienated from my own uncles and
Mm.
aunts. And I thought my uncle was really cool, but at the end of the day, my uncle was going to hell, and my family, my dad, like, we were the good ones that had the answers that the rest of our extended family needed
Yeah.
from us.
Right.
And that was a very alienating thing.
Yeah, and 'cause, you're walking around, again, disconnected from self in a fight response, thinking you're better than. We can't connect from there, right? And I'm sure that's part of your pain. How do you connect to your dad? How do you connect to anyone else if all that's offered to me is a certain way of thinking?
Yeah, if you have any
Yeah.
suggestions on that, Kim,
Well,
I'm all ears.
that's a session. That'll cost you money right there.
Yeah, that's what I'm working through right now.
Yeah, yeah. Just being able to stay connected to self as you interact. Because when certain people, if every time we talked, every time you and I talked, I was drunk, we would never connect.
Oh,
So if someone is drunk on the scripture and everything they
Lord.
say is about scripture, I cannot connect to you.
That's literally my relationship with my dad.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
tell you what I do though. This is, I just came up with this. I'm a
Mm,
pastor, so I have like a semi-alliterated list of attributes that I try to keep in my head when I engage in conversation now with
mm,
whether it's my dad or some fundamentalist type thinking person. And really just in general, I have these three. I try to be clear, I try to be kind, and I try to be curious.
yeah,
And so I
yeah.
try
I
to be very
like it.
clear about where I'm at. I have
Mm-hmm.
boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I try to speak those things clearly, but I try to do it with kindness.
Right.
I'm not being rude. I don't need to be forceful. I try to speak my
Hmm.
truth in as kind a way as possible. And then I try to lean in with curiosity. So if they say something that I
Mm.
find deeply offensive or bizarre, rather than try to lose it on them, if I want to engage in conversation, I can
Right.
just back away, right?
Right.
Maybe the clarity
Yeah.
that I need is to disengage. But if I'm going to engage at all, I'm not going to argue, because
Mm.
that has not been fruitful for me in my relationship with
Right.
my
Sure.
parents or anybody. But rather I ask, like, oh, when you say that, like, what is your concern? Like, when you say
Hmm.
that about immigrants, like, are you,
Hmm.
what is that fear based in, or something
Right.
like
Yeah.
that, you know?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
try to lean into curiosity with the
Hmm.
understanding that they are made up of the same stuff as me,
Hmm.
and that their concerns are human ones, just like mine, and they might be taking those concerns into a different direction that I can't go, but
Yeah.
ultimately that they're people, and that, if I can understand their fears better, then maybe I can love and connect with
Mm.
them better, if that's something that I'm pursuing. So
Yeah. Again, that goes back to that's freedom. And to me, that's liberation theology. It's so good. Hey, I'm gonna put you in the hot seat for 2 minutes, and then we're gonna let you go get back on Instagram. All right. All right. This is the hot seat with me. I'm just gonna ask you a few questions. Whatever comes to mind first is your answer. All right.
okay.
Okay. What is your favorite quote?
Be curious, not judgmental. That's
Mm,
on my Instagram. I heard it in
mm,
Ted Lasso. I don't know where he took it from. He says it was from Walt Whitman. I Googled it. It's not Walt
yeah.
Whitman,
Uh, Ted Lasso is a spiritual show.
right?
It is. It is so good. I love it. It's brilliantly done. Yeah.
I heard that
What
quote
is
right
a
when I needed to hear it.
yeah, see that's good. I love it. So what is on your nightstand?
Uh, East of Eden by John Steinbeck, and an essential oil diffuser.
That is the most perfect balance answer I have ever heard. That is great. All right, last question. If you could give yourself a different name, what would you choose?
Well, I love Recker. I mean, I
Yeah.
have the best last name out there. I mean, I've been accused of a church wrecker and a home wrecker, so you could do a lot of negative with it, but
Oh my
I'll
gosh,
take
this is
it.
so good.
My
Good.
first name, I've never been super fond of it, but because I have a cool last name, I'll just keep it. I don't.
Okay. So we're gonna call you Wrecker Wrecker.
Yeah,
Just
there
like
it
like
is.
the home like yeah, let's just go with that. That is so good.
My middle
Well,
name is
Brian,
Eugene. That's the E, by the way, and BE Recker, if anybody was wondering.
I got you. I got you. All right, Brian Eugene Recker. You are amazing. I'm glad you have wrecked me in the right way. And I know people who will listen to you get wrecked in such a beautiful way as well. Will you take a second and tell people how do they find you on the land of social media?
Yes, I'm on Instagram at BERECKER, BE Recker. I'm on TikTok as well. You mentioned TikTok. I'm also an old person, Kim. I'm not good at
Yeah.
TikTok. I've just started posting all my videos on there. Nothing is on TikTok that's not also on Instagram, but
Right.
I'm BE Recker 87 on TikTok. If you
Okay.
are a TikTok user instead of a Instagram user, I've
Right.
started to now post everything I do there over there, but it's a slower start. I've only just started doing that. Also, my website, brianrecker.com, you can get some fun t-shirts on there, and you can get up with me that way as well. I do some coaching
Okay.
as well, which you can find information about on my website.
Yeah. So anybody looking, is this more like a spiritual coach, spiritual director kind of thing?
Deconstruction, spiritual
Yeah.
coach. Yep.
Good.
I'm not a certified spiritual director, so I wouldn't claim that. I was a pastor for over, almost 9 years. So I think I have a little bit of experience doing that kind of thing. And really just, I think, helping people with my journey and coaching them in their journeys. I do some cohort stuff, but I don't have one planned at the moment. But you can, if you're interested in like a group coaching,
Mm.
I do those occasionally. I'm just wrapping up my Rethinking Spirituality cohort, which is really fun. Bring a group of people together and we just dive
Yeah.
into a whole bunch of different topics. And I have a bunch of reading, so we read a bunch of different things broadly on things like sexual shame, on things
Mm.
like what are we thinking about God these days? What do we think
Right.
about Jesus? Also, relationships and boundaries. For those of us going through
Hmm.
it on the other side of deconstruction, fear, spiritual fear, and hell, and these different things. So we talk about all that in the cohort. I'm just wrapping one up, and I don't currently have another one scheduled, but I probably will. I'm just giving a little bit of space right now, but you
Yeah.
can find out more online.
Well, it sounds really good. Okay, so y'all check out Brian. Brian, thank you. I know you're busy. Appreciate your time and your expertise shared here today.
Thanks so much, Kim. Wonderful conversation.
Yeah, really appreciate it. To all of you listening, I know you heard something today that helped you reconnect to who God says you really are. We'll see y'all next time.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Lid with Kim Honeycutt. Please subscribe, rate, and share. You can find Kim on Facebook or Instagram at kbhoneycutt. To get an autographed copy of Kim's book, visit butyourmotherlovesyou.com. Remember, no matter what, treat yourself well today.